A Massachusetts mother faces murder charges in the deaths of her 3 young children. A devastating case that has gripped the nation and sparked intense debate surrounding postpartum psychosis, prescription medication, and mental health. Joining me now to discuss the latest legal moves is Fox News contributor and the host of Courtroom Confidential, Josh Ritter. So, Josh, thank you for being here. Now, look, as we all know, it's been all Clancy all the time this week in the true crime world because we're coming into the end game. Just to kick us off here, talk a little bit about something that I think has been lost in the sauce, which is the burden of proof. While we all argue various points here, what is dispositive in this case is proving something as the prosecution that you're not hearing a lot about. So elucidate that.
Yeah, this is probably the most important point, and I think what the whole case will turn on, and it really has been overlooked. In most jurisdictions, when you bring an affirmative defense as the defendant, the burden shifts to the defense. For the most part, we all know this, the prosecution has the burden of proving the case beyond a reasonable doubt until the defense raises an affirmative defense. Self-defense is a good example. In a self-defense case, the burden rests upon the defendant to prove the reasonableness of their action. And that usually applies in most jurisdictions to what we call a not guilty by reason of insanity defense. The burden remains on the defense to prove that they were not sane at the time, that they were criminally insane or lacked criminal responsibility for their actions. Massachusetts is unique in that it does not shift the burden. As long as the defense raises the issue, then it's on the prosecution to prove the negative. They have to prove that that person was not insane, that they were a person who could appreciate 2 things. One, the wrongfulness of their actions, and a volitional part to that, which is that they could control themselves in that moment of psychotic break or delusion or whatever you want to call it. So yes, a lot of this case we've been talking about, was she suffering from postpartum psychosis? Was she hearing voices? All of that is important, but it's still on the prosecution to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that none of that is true, or at least even if it was true, she could still appreciate the wrongfulness of her actions. I think that is an incredibly difficult hurdle for the prosecution.
I agree with you, man. We've talked about this on the Weekly Rap Sheet, our show. We just talked about it on Outnumbered. Alicia Acuna made a very important point, I felt. I was talking about the fact that I think that a very important aspect of this case is yet to come, which is going to be the closing arguments, right? Because that's where all this stuff gets concretized. You know, both sides kind of develop their narrative and try to get the jury to think along their storyline. And Alicia brought up the point that the judge's instructions, when the judge charges the jury, as they call it, are going to be so crucial here because they've already had discussions about it, and I'm sure there's argumentation back and forth. They haven't had the final charging conference yet where both sides get together and decide and agree. Ultimately, the judge makes the final call, what he's going to tell the jury. But as part of that, undeniably, is going to be the standard that you just laid out. And if you're sitting where the jury is, boy, that is a cold water in the face reminder that I have to believe at the 95% level that the prosecution has shown me beyond a reasonable doubt that she was capable of understanding this at the time that she did it. And as long as they have that burden shift in mind, I think you're right. It is a steep hill to climb. And frankly, I don't agree with it. I think most other jurisdictions get it right. I think Massachusetts actually statutorily has this one wrong, but that's a different discussion for a different time, a lot more esoteric. All right, let's get to the fact that, as you have rightly pointed out, this has become something we all knew was coming, a battle of the experts, right? Because it's a very metaphysical thing. You're trying to get into somebody's head here, and you have to show it from outside stuff. It's almost like, you know, when science tries to show that electrons exist because of how neutrons react or something. You're not looking at the actual thing. You're looking at the response. So let me ask you this. Who do you think among the experts, as we wind down here, who do you think has been the most effective expert? Which expert is going to be in the head of these jurors as they go to deliberate?
Remember, it's not even who's most effective, but that burden, it's got to be prosecution's expert have to be effective beyond a reasonable doubt.
They have to swing. They have to hit a grand slam. You're right.
You're right. And these experts, I think, have been very good on both sides. They've both taken a look at the exact same evidence, the exact same medical reports, the diagnoses that she had, the prescriptions that she was on, and they've got diametrically opposed views to this. So what do you expect the jurors to do here? I think Dr. Zeizel for the defense is probably the one that I keep coming back to as being the most effective. The other experts that have testified for the defense and the prosecution have also been incredibly effective, and they're very accomplished. They've obviously got expertise and authority to speak on these things. But Zeizel's the one that spoke to her within days, and he talked to her soon after the murders took place, and he's the one that where she first starts talking about these voices. Now, again, a lot has been made about the voices. The voices are important because, to your point, there's circumstantial evidence of what may have been going through her mind, but we don't know what was going through her mind. We know that, okay, if she can be believed, she was hearing these voices. They were command auditory hallucinations. And if jurors feel that his testimony and his evaluation of that means that she couldn't appreciate the wrongfulness of her actions in the moments that the murders took place and couldn't control herself to conform to the law in those moments, and they feel that has not been disproven beyond a reasonable doubt.
That's the thing.
Hammer our point. Then I think that the defense might carry the day here. Just to be fair to the prosecution, though, if you look at the facts, not her words, surrounding these events, though, I think they favor the prosecution. You have a person who was, aware that her husband was going to be outside of the house, had apparently researched how long that took. The murders themselves took time. These were not quick. This was not like she put some sort of poison in their orange juice in the morning. This was a physical interaction she needed to make with each individual child that took time. Then she took the time to answer the phone, return a phone call, attempt to kill herself. These are all, in my view, circumstantial evidence of a person who did have their wits about them enough to at least appreciate right and wrong. But is it beyond a reasonable doubt? In spite of what the other experts have testified to, I do not envy this jury at all.
All right. So, look, facts win cases. That's the old saying among lawyers, and that is how it's supposed to be. But because of the atmospherics, of this case and this thing that we're trying to do would get into her head and the burden shift, facts in this case might not win cases. They still could. Yeah. And I think that there's become a little bit of received wisdom here that the defense and their experts have carried the day already. And they're never going to get a conviction on this. And I'm going to play devil's advocate. And I set you up a little bit because I knew you were going to say Zeizel. Why? Because you and I have talked about it, frankly, to be honest with the audience. And Zeizel is very effective right now. His testimony is there and very effective. But let me ask you this. I want to run down Zeizel a bit here. Didn't it feel a little contrived to you? Zeizel literally turns to the jury and specifically word for word elucidates the legal standard that you talked about at the top. All he neglected to say is, and therefore you must find her not guilty. He literally said, I therefore conclude, something like this, that she could not understand what she was doing, et cetera, et cetera. To me, it felt very choreographed. Now, that's tough to bring out if you're the prosecution. But did you get that sense that it felt a little staged?
Oh, yeah. I was actually surprised the prosecution didn't.
Yes, I thought they were going to as well. They didn't do that. I was surprised as well.
Yeah, usually they're not. An expert is not allowed to testify to the ultimate issue of fact that the jurors are supposed to decide. That is a question purely for the jurors. And usually experts have to confine themselves to kind of educating the jurors as to how they can arrive at that decision, but not actually using their own opinion as the decision that the jurors should accept. But they didn't object, and I was kind of shocked by that. But you're right, it was nearly verbatim from the jury instruction that they're going to receive, and he gave every possible opinion that covered their bases. I also thought, again, to be a little bit fair and play devil's advocate here. It was, you've pointed this out. It's very convenient that the only time we hear about voices is after the fact. And it happens to be in front of her own attorney retained expert that she starts to talk about these voices. To me, I don't know if jurors are going to appreciate that. That would be something, if I were sitting on this case as a juror, that I would struggle with, because she was a very earnest person beforehand in seeking help. She was telling medical providers, psychiatrists, her loved ones, her husband, her mother-in-law, her own mother, everybody who would listen about what she was going through. No mention of voices until after the murder.
All right, and then let's go to that and extend it a little bit. Here is Zeizel. He is the one who has seen her the most post-event. He is supposed to be treating her psychologically, and he's keeping doctor's notes. Now, the voices, which Zeizel testified he overheard when he gave Lindsay his phone to call Lindsay's husband, Patrick. So here's Lindsay on Zeizel's phone with the speakerphone on, talking to her husband from the hospital. Zeizel is there. It's Zeizel's phone. And she gives this voice thing that she talks about, this voice thing. And then Zeizel also testified he got similar testimony from the chaplain, Sheila Kavanaugh.
Right.
And he doesn't make a notation? This is the most notation-worthy thing you would get as a doctor. I mean, this is like, you're a cancer doctor and the test came back positive for cancer and you didn't put it in the file. Of course you're going to do that. How could he not do that? So he testifies on the stand. Yeah, I did keep notes, but I didn't make note of that. And then Sheila Kavanaugh, who we're going to get to, the chaplain, testifies to the same thing. Yeah, I kept notes, but I didn't make note of that. Are you buying?
If I was the prosecution, especially when it came to Kavanaugh, and she's saying she didn't take notes, and when asked about that, she said, well, this is not the type of thing I would take notes about. Maybe it's the snarkiness in me. If I'm the prosecutor, I'm saying, why? Are you concerned about running out of ink? I mean, what possibly about that would prevent you from writing a note about perhaps one of the most significant things that the person you're interviewing is telling you, in that she's hearing notes that had commanded her to...
On the day of. She's talking about the day it occurred.
Yeah. Yeah. It was difficult to... It does stretch the credulity of those experts. Now, again, are jurors going to believe that they're not being honest, or that Clancy had in fact said it and she's not being honest? It's a lot at play. I guess I'll say this too. It also is, I think, part of this defense strategy of really keeping everybody's eyes off the ball, because people are wondering about voices and psychosis, and really none of those things are in the law. The law doesn't say you have to be suffering from psychosis or you have to be hearing voices. The law says, did you know the difference between right and wrong?
Right.
And I'll give credit to those experts. Every single one of them did answer the question, saying, yes, you can be both in a state of psychosis and understand the difference between right and wrong.
All right. I agree with that. Let's go to another aspect of Sheila Kavanaugh here, since we're talking about her. So she testified, as we said, that Lindsay told her in the hospital about a week after the event. Not only did she talk about this voice stuff, but that she was, I want to get the wording right, she was glad or happy that the children were safe.
Tuesday the 31st, she said to me as I held her hand to comfort her, I am so glad my children are safe.
We've both interviewed a number of doctors on this thing, and the idea of bringing the children to safety by killing them is apparently not uncommon in these circumstances, in situations, filicide, when a mother kills the kids. All right. Yet. Let's go through what the theory is here. Dr. Resnick, the final defense expert testimony. He was the last testifier in the defense case. He was there, presumably, to answer a question that the defense knows the jurors have, which is, how could she look up CVS, the facts you gave earlier, look up the laxative, call CVS, deal coherently with them, send him away to a restaurant that they'd never gotten takeout from before, after looking at it on the Apple app to see how far it was, presumably. Go through all the machinations that we've talked about. Apparently, either take off her Apple Watch or something happens with the Apple Watch because it stops reporting. Goes upstairs, locks the door behind her, jumps from 13 feet, cuts herself in quotes because they're really just abrasions, very, very thin. Murdered the kids in sequence. Isolated one of the kids in a separate room or chased the kid into the room where he fled. All of these things demonstrate linear thinking, an organized mind, etc. How then can we believe in a psychosis defense? And Resnick testifies that you can be organized, thinking organized. Psychosis can come suddenly. I think that's the point of these voices, right? Or the voice, the commanding voice. I was fine, and then this voice intruded. That's going to be the narrative. Okay. Then she wakes up in the hospital a week later, and the first thing she says, actually not a week later, when she wakes up in the hospital after they're treating her, her first lines were the following. Number one, she was horrified by what she did. And number two, do I have a lawyer? Okay. Very clearly at that point, not psychotic. There's a reason I'm recounting all this. So, psychotic, wakes up in the hospital. I'm horrified. Do I have a lawyer? A week later, to the chaplain, I'm glad they're safe. Now, that's not normal. That's a psychotic statement. That is of a piece with, I heard a voice told me to do it. So we're being asked to believe chronologically here. I was fine. A voice made me psychotic. I was fine and worried about a lawyer. I'm glad they're safe. I guess I'm psychotic again. Does it not seem to you that this is an awfully punctual psychosis that seems to arrive at very convenient times for the defense?
And both Zeizel and Resnick are completely unbothered by that. They say, yeah, absolutely. Psychosis is episodic. It can come and go. You can have a planning, linear thinking mind and be in the depths of psychosis. You can drift into psychosis for several minutes and then immediately wake up from it. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, how in the world then, if that's the answer to everything, how in the world are you supposed to prove that that was not in fact true? If the answer can be, it can be anything and everything whenever it chooses to be, how do you possibly prove that to not be true?
Exactly. How can you ever show? I mean, there's no answer to that. It's such the psychosis, the word psychosis can't be the answer to everything, right? And in Massachusetts, if you do get accepted into the case, an insanity defense, you're baked into the cake. Every time, did you buy the gun? Yeah, I bought the gun. I was hearing voices. Then what happened? Well, I loaded the gun. Why'd you load the gun? I was hearing voices. Well, then after that, you went out to eat and you were fine. Yeah, the psychosis went away.
You see what I'm hearing the voices then.
Yeah, I wasn't hearing the voice went away. Then it came back and told me to shoot. Then it came back and told me dismember the body. Then it came back and told me bury those parts. And then it told me, to go back to work and act like everything was normal. It is not, and I'm sort of frustrated by it. It's not even that I disagree with the evidence, because I do. Frankly, I do. In this case, that piece I do. I'm not taking a position on whether she should be found guilty or not, because I don't want to do that. But that evidence I don't find compelling. But my point is, under that structure, under that rubric, once you get in Massachusetts an insanity defense accepted, you're 99% towards being found not guilty. I just don't think it's a workable system. And I just feel like it's a real flaw here in that when they talk about the system failing, that system's failing. All right, I want to go to something else while we have time. Her mother. And I got to go to this as well. And you can see, again, I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm not advocating to convict her, but her mother's testimony bothers me. And it goes to this idea that we started with where I said, we're trying to do something that's metaphysical, impossible, get in her head. The defense elicits from the mother the idea that Lindsay was still slipping down and groping for help. The mother testifies she saw Lindsay 2 days before the event, that Lindsay had previously told her before that visit that she was thinking of harming the kids. Okay. And the mother then, after visiting with Lindsay 2 days before the event, texts her and says, I'm glad to see you doing better. Now, the prosecution brought that out, and I think they rope-a-dope the defense a little bit, and I think you're going to hear about this in summation. The mother says, in a way to assuage that narrative, I was just being encouraging. I didn't actually believe she was doing better. Here's where I'm going. You're the woman's mother. You don't believe she's doing better. You know she's had over 30 prescriptions for 13 medications. And she told you that she was thinking of harming the kids. And you just saw her now, 2 days before the event. And nobody, Patrick, the mother, the mother-in-law, nobody got together and said, we got to commit her. We got to get her away. She's going to kill the kids. She just told us she's going to harm the kids. You're going to leave her there? And you actually are testifying that you don't believe she's doing better? Again, I'm not blaming the mother. I'm actually taking the other side of it. I think they're covering for her. That's my own feeling. I don't buy that testimony. What's your thought?
I mean, you make an excellent point. You're right. You're either calling into question the mother's honesty about all of this.
I'm sorry. I got to do it.
No, I appreciate that, because you're right. If it were true, then it doesn't really make her actions, Patrick's actions, all that understandable if it was as serious as they're now saying that it was in those days leading up to it. Or it was that serious and they all just kind of let it go, in which case it doesn't make it doesn't excuse anything that Lindsay Clancy did, but I guess it just makes it rolls into that overall theory that a lot of people dropped the ball here, which I think is just going to make the overall question for jurors all that more difficult too, is that the defense has put the system on trial. I think they've thrown some shade at the husband. I think they've thrown some shade at other people who interacted with her, as if making it sound like Lindsay Clancy was on this collision course with disaster where nobody did anything to help her, and she had no self-autonomy herself. And that's the part that bothers me, is that end part. Well, where in all of this do we get to the part where she could have just said no to the voices, right?
Right.
I mean, if she's hearing the voices, she's also talking about intrusive thoughts of harming herself, and it sounded like she had resisted that for some period of time. But then the first time she hears a voice commanding her to hurt the children, she immediately acts upon it. It's a lot of this is really hard to believe.
We're being asked to believe a lot here relative to her story, and it took a while for it all to sort of seep into my head, because I had the reaction I think most of us had, which is you first heard about this story and you go, oh my God, she killed her 3 kids, strangled them with exercise bands. Good God. And she's going to trial on it? Oh, come on. She's got to be convicted. Then you heard the whole story of her, searching for help, reaching out for medications, various doctors. She's a nurse. She should know that you got to keep track of your own meds. And okay, but you can doctor shop. People do it. She's looking around for something. The system is supposed to help her. She knows the system better than we do, but all right, fair enough. You started to come down on the idea, at least I did, that, all right, well, look, maybe she should just go into a mental health facility, because it does sound like she really was reaching out. And it took me a while to really sort of internalize the facts and start to say to myself, I got problems with the narrative. And I'm going to tell you another aspect of the narrative that I have problems with. I was thinking of harming the kids, which we got the testimony from the mom. I was I heard voices day of, which, as I said, conveniently comes and goes and arrives apparently for the first time on the day of the event. And 2 people testified to it that didn't note it. And yet none of these things were ever told to a healthcare provider that has been brought into court. Because again, if she had told a healthcare provider of any stature that was treating her, I'm getting thoughts of harming my children, it's going to be incumbent upon them to call Child Protective Services. You're going to have to, at that point, go to the experts. There's got to be an intervention. I can tell you as a former cop, if they said to me, I went to a mental health call and did a wellness check or something, and said, I'm having thoughts of hurting my kids, you are on the hook. You're responsible, because if you don't do it, and then she acts on it, it's on you. And so just as I hate to be so sort of blunt about it, but even as never mind looking out for the kids, but just as a CYA, you're going to make those notifications. There's no testimony that she ever said this. So where is all this coming from? She's so groping for help. She's having thoughts of hurting the kids. She tells her mother, and nobody acted upon it, and she never told anybody else. I have problems with these facts, Josh.
Yeah. Listen, I am convinced she was struggling with mental health issues. I think there's enough evidence to support that. I am convinced that she was suffering with depression. She was taking medications. I think that even the medications were probably not helping. It sounds like some of them were more hurtful. Some of them might have been even reacting with each other. But it does seem, even as desperate as she was, and she's talking about insomnia and feelings of self-harm and everything else, it does seem like there was this quantum leap out of nowhere where she goes from, I'm not feeling great, I'm depressed, I'm taking meds, I have insomnia, I'm struggling, to I'm playing with the kids, making a snowman, and then within hours, I'm tying exercise bands around their neck. It just, that to me is the part that it's like, what? That's why nobody saw this coming, because there was no signs of that coming.
Right.
I think a lot of people were concerned about her, and a lot of people were trying to help.
Right.
I think Patrick was earnestly trying to help his wife, and her loved ones were earnestly trying to help her. But I don't think anybody saw this on the horizon because there were just no signs of it. So we're either going to have to believe that, according to her experts, you can go from 0 to 60, from playing with snowmen to completely psychotic within a matter of moments, or it's just not a narrative that tracks.
Yeah, I think that's a very good way to put it. That's really what you're being asked to believe, that you can go 0 to 60. And, or I don't know what to make of the mother's testimony then, because the mother puts her at about 59, right before 60. I'm thinking of harming the kids. And that's why I have so much trouble with that testimony. When I heard that, I'm sitting there saying, she's talking about killing the grandkids and you didn't step in? And then I say, Paul, dial that back. You don't want to blame the mother. She's not on trial here, and you don't know what went on between them. And that's when I come back to the idea that the narrative just isn't tracking for me, because I don't know of a grandmother on earth that doesn't start to say, I got to get involved here. I got to get those kids out of there, because what I'm hearing is unbelievably alarming. Let's close out. We only got a little bit of time. Let's close out with something that I think we also have not heard of. You know, when you're in a situation like this, you and I are talking about this thing a lot. We've both been up there. You know, you got to search for aspects that haven't been chewed over a million times. You and I both know that. And I want to go to this. The demonstrators have a right to demonstrate. Okay. But here's where I want to go. Has anybody really thought it through? Because those demonstrators will be high-fiving each other. Were she found not guilty by reason of insanity? Now, that's not a complete exoneration. I get that. And then she's going to be dealing with getting a civil commitment. Okay, there are provisions in Massachusetts law over that. How are they going to feel were she to fight that? How are they going to feel if she goes in for a couple of years and then begins petitioning to get out? Now, let's remember, she has a couple of big lawsuits going. How are they going to feel if Lindsay Clancy gets out in 3 years and says, I feel so much better, I finally got the right treatment I need, I have millions in the bank, so now I'm going to restart my life. Now she's a poster child for postpartum, which I'm not saying doesn't exist, but now she says, I restarted my life, things are going so much better, I'm so happy to announce I'm pregnant again. How are they going to feel if and when all of this stuff happens, which I think they're essentially advocating for? I mean, what are we going to do? We're going to give her a talk show? I mean, how do you think this should go were she to be found not guilty? Do you see what I'm doing?
I 100% see what you're doing. And I keep saying this along the same lines. This case is not a cause. Yeah. This is not a case about let's triumph women's health and let's shed light on postpartum issues and let's expose the inadequacies in the mental health care system. All of those things may be true, and you can go ahead and parade all you want for all of those things. That is not this case. This case is about the murder of 3 children. And I think people are getting way too caught up in the causes that they're trying to attach to this whole thing and losing sight on what this is about. If those jurors come back with a verdict of guilty, they are not somehow implicitly giving their approval to the mental health care system as it stands right now.
Right.
And if they come back with a verdict of not guilty by reason of insanity, they're not saying that they're impeaching the mental health care system. Their only decision should be based upon the facts and circumstances of this case. And that's where people have really lost the plot on this. I am all for, you want to advocate for women's health and postpartum issues and everything else. Please don't do it with a case where there's 3 dead babies. Like, this is just not the time and place for that type of advocacy and support, or whatever you want to call it. One thing too, I'll kind of attach to the end of this, Paul, is that those people outside, and everyone watching this, the people on Twitter and the people on social media and everybody who's got an opinion on this whole thing, that seem to feel heavily that Lindsay Clancy is the victim here, they have not seen or heard things that only people inside that courtroom have seen.
That's right. Good point.
Those jurors have seen the autopsy photos. They have seen the crime scene photos.
That's
they
right.
have heard the 911 call. Do not discredit how heavily all of that is weighing upon those jurors' minds. I am sure that they have watched Lindsay Clancy struggle in court and cry and break down, and anybody, any good-hearted person watching that doesn't feel good about it. I mean, you feel bad for this woman, what she's going through. But everybody who was not inside that courtroom has also not seen the other side of this and how horrific this case is. And this is not going to be something where they're just going to easily make a decision on it.
You're 100% right. And it's such a great point, man, because you know what happens inside of a case, anybody who's ever run a case of any sort, prosecuted one, defended one of the things you recognize is that you don't understand the nuances inside a case unless you're in it. And it's really, there is unfortunately a pretty good gulf between what you get to see and what's really going on in the 4 corners of the case. And a lot of times that gets lost in the sauce. I'm going to give you the last word here because of some of the points you've just made. And one of the things that makes Josh Ritter at Courtroom Confidential a go-to is the fact that you did both prosecutorial work at a high level and now defense work. So you've seen both sides of it, both sides of our adversarial system, which I still believe is the best in the world. I want to put you on a spot here. The prosecution goes last, so let's start with the defense. Another nuance in Massachusetts, the prosecution goes last, and I think that's actually a benefit for them, even though they have the burden of proof. But, okay, yeah. I think this thing is going to come down to how effective the summations are. I'm sure both sides are crunching away. They got separate lawyers working on it. I'm not sure who's going to deliver it for each side. Probably Reddington, because the jury knows him on the defense side. Let's see who does it on the prosecution side. You're the defense attorney, and then I'm going to ask you to do prosecution. Sum up for me in about a minute on each. Defense attorney, how are you going to create a narrative? What's that narrative going to be for Lindsay Clancy's not guilty verdict by reason of insanity? Go.
I think you point to the idea that Lindsay Clancy, by all accounts, was an incredibly loving and involved mother. There is no indication here that they were going through some sort of ugly divorce, that there was a custody dispute at play. She loved those children. She would do anything for those children, but she got very sick. And she got sick and the system failed her. And she earnestly sought help. And instead of getting help, she was getting worse. And they were prescribing her with heavy-duty medications that were causing her to be worse, or worse yet, were interacting with each other and causing her to completely snowball out of control. And if it wasn't for all of that, for them missing it, for them misdiagnosing her, and for them over-prescribing her and under-prescribing her, none of this would have ever happened. She is not a person who ever in her life would have harmed these children were it not her being put on this collision course with disaster. And in those final moments, she completely became untethered and she lost control of reality and didn't even realize the wrongfulness of her actions, because to her, they were going to be safe and she was going to be dead, and it was all the pain that she was living through was going to be over.
Now, do you lean into, with some language in there, to the idea that she's not a hero and she's not a martyr, but then say all of that? Do you try to temper it a little bit?
Yeah, and I think Reddington will. I think
I agree.
Very smart, and I think he will. And I think he will. He's not going to try to make this sound like, that anybody should be happy with the end result of this whole thing. I think but he's going to say that, listen, you're dealing with a sick person who needs to go off to a hospital, not a prison. I
think that is. I agree, and I think that is some version of that is what we're going to see. Obviously, referencing the evidence that's been brought out in the trial. Okay, same exercise. Now you're the prosecutor. You're going to go last. You're aware of, if we notice, they notice, that's where the defense is going to go. What are you going to try to send the jury back into the deliberation room with a narrative in their head, narrative that they can see that tells them, I got to convict this woman? Go.
And I think they may have missed the boat on doing this already, but what I think they should have been doing from the front is say Lindsay Clancy was sick. She was a sick woman. We're not saying that she's an evil person here. We're saying she is a woman who got sick, and she did suffer from psychosis, and she did have heavy-duty medications that she was taking. And maybe, ladies and gentlemen, she even was hearing voices. But what is abundantly clear is that none of that prevented her from having the basic understanding that wrapping exercise cords around the necks of her babies was wrong. And that's what this entire case boils down to. 3 children had no one else in the world that they expected to protect them but their own mother. And in the final moments of their life, when they were scared and they were terrified and they were struggling to breathe, it was their own mother who was taking their life, and their own mother knew that she was doing something was wrong. It may have been to stop the pain. It may have been because she was tired from being tired. And it may have been that she was so completely tortured, but that doesn't mean that she didn't know it was wrong. And this case isn't about calling her an evil human being, but it is about holding her responsible for her action.
All right. I couldn't agree more. I think that's a preview of the two that we're going to see. High bar for the prosecution. And notice something, folks, that Josh and I have not been talking about because it's something that's been missing from the prosecution's case. If you're going to buy the idea that she wasn't psychotic and she did have agency and she could have understood, she was capable of understanding what she was doing was wrong, motive. Why did she do it? The prosecution, that's on prosecution. Why then did she do it? If she was capable of understanding that it was wrong and she still did it, why? And that goes to what you said, I think, very, very accurately, which is we've seen nothing about this being a troubled marriage or an imminent divorce. I know there's speculation online and everything else, but none of that came in. And so that has to, from where I sit, that cuts for the defense because it's such a horrific thing. You got to say to yourself, she had to be crazy. Who else would do
Why
this?
else did she do this? Yeah.
And unfortunately, that I think cuts for the defense, or fortunately, depending on where you come out. Because personally, I think that the most just outcome here, either way, is she ends up in a mental health facility for a very long time. But we'll have to see how it goes. Folks, you can catch him on Courtroom Confidential. Turn on the TV. You're going to see him. Frankly, I see too much of him. I'm tired of his face. And now, of course, I'm teasing. I am Paul Mauro. We are the Fox True Crime Podcast. We appreciate all of you for being here. And in the meantime, please stay safe.